G'day and welcome to the Genre Fiction Podcast. I'm Jack Roney.
And I'm Harry Culver.
And Harry, introducing our special guest for this episode is historical fiction author Foster Burton. Now, Foster has worked in a vast array of jobs, including in alphabetical order, an app developer, bartender, barista, branding project manager, in car consignment, classic car sales, car restoration, carpentry, pizza cutter, drafting, insurance sales, marketing, motorcycle salesman, motorcycle test rider, photographer, and now author of Australian historical fiction. Foster's debut novel, a 19th century historical thriller, The Hollows, is now available in ebook, paperback, or specially signed and numbered first editions. So, Foster, g'day and welcome to the Genre Fiction Podcast.
G'day, how you going?
Good. Now, we met a number of weeks ago. We were both presenting at the Gold Coast Writers Association. It was a gathering, I guess, for their writing members. And you and I both had an opportunity to do a presentation and get to know the local writers. And you and I got to speak with each other and thought you would be perfect to come on our podcast because you told such an engaging story about how you came to start writing. So could you share that story with us today? How you came to the epiphany of deciding that you want to make a go of it as being a writer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you've probably heard from my resume, I've always been somebody that has been after a particular way of life, a particular fulfillment in what I wanted to do for a career. And I'm not sure exactly where that stemmed from, except probably just I'm a very naturally curious person. So I was always trying to find I don't like to use the word jobs, but we'll call them jobs for this. But I was always trying to find a way to make money that would give me a particular sort of freedom, would give me a particular sort of fulfillment. That and I think that during when I was bartending and baristering when I was younger, there was always other versions of it that weren't particularly normal. Like the baristering, I actually fitted out a combi van with a coffee machine and was bouncing up and down the highway at 4 o'clock in the morning, selling coffee to the road workers because I wanted to do it my way. Um, and I think as I grew older and moved into sort of businesses that they kept funneling down into this like the passion funnel. And from a very young age, I've had two very, very strong passions that have been there since I was a boy, and that's been classic cars and books. And there's been a lot of that have come and gone, but they've always been the ones that have stayed there and sort of just burn within me. It's always like I'm either reading a book or I'm reading a Just Cars magazine or playing around on car sales. Um, so after a quite a successful business career, the last of that being that I had a branding agency. I lived in Brisbane, and I'd been working in app development and then merged that company with a branding agency. Um, it had skyrocketed, and we had hired a whole bunch of people, and I was working with all of my best mates, and it was it was great. It was pretty much like a frat club where we were making cool designs and just being the boys. And and then we had this is a little tangent, but I'll tie it home. But we had our first child. My wife and I had our first child, and I was convinced that it was a girl throughout the entire thing. We didn't find out, obviously. I was convinced to the point that it, even when we were in the hospital, we were like, should we revisit our boy names? And I was like, nah, it's definitely a girl. Like, this isn't even, no point. So we go in there, my wife has a cesarean, up comes the baby, and there is a big set of gentleman sausage. And I remember saying, my first words were, what the hell? And then these thoughts went through my head, and it was like guns, planes, cars, like, yes. And then,
Hunting.
yeah, it was just this thing just like set fire on me. And I hadn't thought about it for the last 9 months, even considered having a boy. So I'm sitting there in hospital. And at this point, that very night, that first night, we're lying in the hospital bed, my son is asleep on my wife. And I'm just having this absolute existential crisis. And I was just like, I don't want my son to grow up. Okay, so just at this point, branding and design is something I've always enjoyed, but it wasn't something I was passionate about. All of the guys I worked with were very passionate designers. They were living their dreams in this agency, and we were working with big name clients, doing like clients that were paying us ridiculous money to have creative free reign to do whatever we wanted. It was the dream for them, but I wasn't. I sort of just stumbled into the business by luck, and had met a guy, and we'd merged businesses, and it worked beautifully. And sitting there, I had this like not even epiphany, it was a crisis where I was like, I don't want my son to grow up and walk into an office and see me doing something that I'm not passionate about. And so this is probably the worst time ever to make huge life changes, to work, to be like, I should take my secure business that's been really good for the last 7 years and sell out of it and go after my passion. And so I spoke to my wife, who is at this point recovering from cesarean, probably during like the late stages of anesthetic, was like, what a great idea. You should definitely pursue your passions.
The best time to ask anything at that point.
Yeah. And so I called my business partners, and these are like my two best friends. And I said, hey lads, I've had a boy. Congratulations. Yeah, whatever. Great. But I want to go down to 3 days a week. And for 2 days a week, I want to open a classic car dealership. And which is obviously, I've always traded classic cars, and I've always had hundreds of cars, and so they've known, like, it's not something I'm just randomly diving into. And they were like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. And I said, look, I have ADD. I can do my job in 3 days. Nothing will change. Like, my job is to be out there closing deals. I'm like, I can make this happen. This will be fine. And so they reluctantly went, okay. So we sent an email out to all the staff, going down to 3 days a week, bought and sold one car that following week, a little MGB. And I was like, I'm in. And so 2 weeks later, I completely sold out of the business. Wow. And went and rented this cool old, it was like an abandoned service station in Clayfield in Brisbane, and started to stock it up with classic cars and restore them and sell them. And that business, I was applying all of the same branding principles to classic cars, which I don't think anybody had really done to that degree. So it was like taking nice, affordable classics, old Land Rovers and Minis and MGs and things like that, all British stuff, photographing them in the city with people driving them with this lifestyle element to it, and then running it all through Instagram. And it exploded. And as a business, it just went absolutely ballistic. And it sounds crass, but it was making money hand over fist. And I only say that because at the peak of it, when I would say that it was like absolutely ticking every box that a business should, and absolutely ticking every box that a passion should, I said to my wife, I'm like, I feel depressed. I feel like I'm like not using my brain. I feel like I don't deserve the money from this, because I'm just being clever and finding these cars where no one's looking, and then fixing them up and then selling them for a big profit to, an accountant that lives in inner city Brisbane. Just wants to look cool when he goes to get his morning coffee. So I just don't feel like I'm earning the money. And so at this point, I start to then write down like what the perfect kind of job career looks like for me. And I remember dot pointing this down, and it was, I wanted to be able to do it from anywhere in the world. I wanted it to challenge me and use my brain. I want to be fulfilled by it. And I wanted it to be something that is timeless, that I could do long term. And so I was always just toying with whatever that could be. So it was like a whole range of like more digital businesses, and even just like stuff within industries that I already knew. Like, could it be something still within the car industry? But long story short, 2022, we sold up in Brisbane. Another great epiphany. My wife and I had always talked about wanting to live on a farm and get out of the city. And we thought, what a better time to do it when we have our kid, when we have a first, because we want a young boy who's going to grow up and scrape his knees and, be a bit of a wild one. And so we sold up in Brisbane and we bought a farm in the southern Gold Coast that was absolutely abandoned. Like this thing was, we walked in there naively and went, "Oh, this is beautiful. Look at all these pretty trees and flowers." We buy this thing, and the fault, like pretty much the day we settled, the neighbor comes over and tells us that every tree with flowers is this particular weed called devil's fig, and I have to get rid of it urgently. Which then leads me to chainsawing 20 acres of devil's fig and poisoning it. But at this point, we're in this weird limbo. We've sold our house. We're renovating this farm while living down in Coffs Harbour and traveling up and back. And I'm still trading a few cars just to, pay the bills. And I drove out no, in the middle of this, we did a trip to New Zealand, and I meet this gentleman in New Zealand who loves Land Rovers. And he invites us to his place for lunch. And he says, "Oh, I've got this farm back in Bow Desert. I've got this cool old Land Rover out there. You should go and have a look at it if you want to buy it." So I'm like, "All right, sure." So he gives me the address and tells me the station hand's name. And just Christmas of 20, was it 21? I think it was 21 actually. We end up, like, I go for a drive out to Bow Desert to go look at this car. And it's an old Land Rover. And I went out and it's the most beautiful. It's like his little farm. It's a 10,000 acre cattle station called the Hollows. It's the most beautiful place I've ever seen. The station bloke isn't there. The overseer's not there, but I let myself into the shed, and the shed's full of vintage race cars in like airtight bubbles, and this massive machinery shed's just full of stuff. So I looked at the car quickly, went, "Yeah, I'll buy it. It's great." So as I'm driving out, it was like the sun's setting, and I decided to pull over, and I was driving an old Defender and just park on the side of the road in, because it was a couple of kilometers in, and just watch the cattle. And it was these beautiful rolling hills. And I sat up there and I was just staring at it. And the thought sequence went like this. It went, "I wonder how they got this property back in the day, like such a beautiful plot of land. That would make a great story. Oh my God, people get paid to write books." And this is the sequence, just boom, boom, boom. And it was just like, I got hit with lightning in the face. And I've read, like, I'm just going to do this. Like, this is my bookshelf. This is what you can see. And then there's like, I'm an avid reader. I'm like, we haven't got a television. And I've read, like you guys, hundreds, if not thousands of books. And I've always got a book in my hands. And I never, ever, ever connected the dot that people do it as a job. And that sounds so ridiculous, but it's so true. And I just was like, "Oh, I know what it is." I'm like, "I'm going to be an author. I'm going to write a book." And it was like all of these like stories of my life and all of these experiences I've had and all of this like searching and searching. It's like it just went like boom. And I called Belinda, who's my wife, who is very, very understanding and very gracious and very lovely.
Can I just say, I think that's the one thing the three of us have got in common is very patient, understanding.
Patient, understanding wives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah. And I called her up, and she's back in Coffs Harbour at the moment, and I'm in the middle of whoop whoop. And I said, "I think I found it. I know what it is." And she says, "Oh, what's that?" And I said, "I'm going to write a book." And she goes, "Okay." And I was like, "No, I'm dead serious. I'm like, that's it." And I listed everything. I can do it from anywhere in the world, blah, 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 blah. And she said, "Okay." Anyway, this story, as I'm driving home, I have my phone on quad lock in the Defender, and the outline for this book is just like banging through my head. And I'm just sitting there, which is completely illegal, but it's the back way from, Brisbane to Coff. So
don't worry, you're not talking to a cop.
Yeah. Sorry, Jack. What's the statute of limitations? 2021. So anyway, I'm just literally driving, and I'm just like banging out, because Defenders are slow. I'm doing about 40 k's an hour. And by the time I get back to Coffs, I fling open the door to my in-laws' house, and I'm like, "This is it." Like, throw everything off my mother-in-law's desk and slap my computer down. I'm like, "Nobody talk to me. I'm going to write a book." And it was such a vivid thing. And so anyway, my wife at this point is like, kind of like, "Okay, that sounds fun. Like, you're also trying to renovate a farm, and we've also got a couple of month-old baby, but that sounds really cool, Ben. You do that." And I said to her, like, I slept on it. The next morning I woke up, and I was like so convinced. I'm like, "This is it." So I had a couple of cars that I'd kept for quite a long time that I was planning on, keeping as sort of investments or, just keeping them because I really loved them. And I just said to her, I said, look, I'm going to sell all of these cars and I'm going to put the money into an account for my savings and I'm going to pay myself a wage. I'm going to do this. I'm like, I'm going to pay myself 6 months of wages. I'm going to do this properly. So like, and she goes, oh, and I did. And there's one of these cars that like, it was a speech at our wedding. It was like, Ben will never ever sell this car. And I was like, no, I'll definitely sell it. Like, this is it. I've never found anything I'd sell that for. This is it. And so I sold it to a friend of mine and I literally put all the car, had no car, which for me is like having no pants on. And 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 I just hooked in and I was just doing 8-hour days and not even knowing like, I'm writing here on pure ego. Like I can write a book. And one of the like I think somewhere in the first draft, it's like just pouring out in my head. And after maybe, I don't know, probably halfway through this first draft, and like I'm just smashing out words. I'm looking at it, and then I'd be reading books at night and looking at it and reading books. Like, what looks different between these two things? I just could not figure it out. And then I realized I don't even know what indenting is. And so it's just like blocks of words on every page. And I just did, even just like putting like conversation on new lines and I just didn't even know. So I'm like, I need to go back to basics and even figure out the structure of how to like format a page for a book. But I'm very determined and also have a problematic self-belief in myself. So I kept going as we then renovated this place. And so I'd travel up there at the start of the week and I'd write from 4 a.m. till 7:30. I'd renovate all day and then I'd try and bang out a few more words at night. And I just did that for 6 months. Which then, in my head, I'd knock out the first draft in 6 months. I'd have an agent that following week, a major publishing deal the week after that. And then, and then I'd be sailing.
Sorry.
Anyway.
Was this the point you discovered your devil's figs with respect to writing?
Yeah. That's right. So anyway, that's basically how it ended up here.
So I know the people listening to the audio podcast can't see this, but so this is why you've got to jump across to our YouTube channel if you haven't already subscribed. I'm holding up Foster's book now called The Hollows. Now it is a beautifully produced book, and we're going to talk about this later. And this is what really captured my interest in everything you're doing, is that everything you do in terms of your book production as a self-published author, your website, your marketing, your social media, the way you speak, everything has got a touch of class. And for me, you tell a really great yarn. Your story that you just conveyed kind of gives me a sense that once you decide on something, you go for it. But it sounds like you also lean into your marketing experience. And I think that really shows in the way the professionalism in everything you do. And for me, looking at your website and everything, the way you packaged your author brand sets a benchmark for all self-published authors to aim for. And it goes to show that you can really market yourself and run this as a business. So my next question for you is, now that you've made the commitment, do you see this now as a long-term gig?
Absolutely. I've never wanted something more in my life. And I say that with not so much for interesting, actually, because I've had a long time of being in business. And it's the first time I've ever wanted something not for the financial aspect of it at all. Because financially, it is the opposite of a good business, as you guys would know. Like, as you're trying to break into like writing, it's a flippin' tough slog. Yeah. You're pouring money into marketing, and a lot of it is burning it, as you also, which we'll get onto. But the financial reward versus like where I've come from, or even like even that aside, like even if I just come from a normal job into this, like you're really going to you want to love it, to be able to stick with it to the point that obviously that we all know that it can get there. But yeah, absolutely long term. I think I've got this little diary that I write down like book ideas as I have. I'm sure you guys do it too, and I'm sure anybody writing books does. Yeah, but like, yeah, there's years of stuff in there.
Yeah,
and it just like it's something where I'm like, I want to write until I can know, like, until I have dementia. because it's such an amazing thing. It is something that you continue to do, and it's just like this craft that you keep honing. So absolutely long term.
It's amazing, this writing bug, when it bites and it sinks its claws into you, how it can really affect you. And I think there's a number of similarities I spoke about between the three of us. I spoke about the fact that we've all got very supportive wives. We've
Yeah.
all, announced that we've got this harebrained idea of wanting to become an author. And Harry and I have discussed our stories a lot, and there's a lot of comparisons similar to what you just described, Foster. For me, I was a police officer for 33 years, and then I decided, look, this isn't what I want to do anymore. I really had to
Yeah.
follow my passion, and it wasn't until I got the advice from a good friend of mine who sadly passed away this year from leukemia. And his words,
Mm.
he's a police officer, and he said to me, "Hey, look at me. Life's short. Don't waste time doing things that you're not happy." So I took a leap of faith and left my, long-standing government job where I had security. And again, thankfully, because I've got a very supportive wife, I've been able to do that. Now I'm studying full time and having a crack at being a full-time author. Again, Harry,
Yeah.
if you don't mind, I'll speak for Harry really quickly. He was a paramedic. He's taking a sabbatical. He's now on a boat. So do you want to add to this, Harry? I don't want to speak for you, but I can see what
Yeah.
we're talking
Look,
about.
we basically came to the conclusion that both of us, me working as a paramedic and my wife working as a teacher, and that wasn't her choice to do that. It was just a case of, she was a fisheries manager, but political sort of stuff such as Campbell and Newman and getting rid of anything to do with environment and stuff like that means that
Yeah.
she had to fall back on teaching. And after a few years of that, and me after 20 years of being a paramedic, I just couldn't keep doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm taking a year off to see how we go.
Yeah.
But then it was a case of screw it. We came up with the decision to sell the house and buy a boat and see where that takes us. So
That's so good. It's like when they say that marijuana is a gateway drug. Before you know it, you'll be a heroin addict. It's like I might write one sentence, and before you know it, you're on a boat, and you've sold your house. Yeah, that's so good.
So there was another little story before we'd started recording. You were we were talking about our names, and Harry and we've shared that. Jack
you
and
did
Harry
mention Ben.
Yes. Jack and I,
Yes.
Jack and Harry. That's our pen names. Foster, you said that. Oh, I'm actually Ben, but all the men in my family are called Foster. What's the story behind that?
Yes, that is true. So my real name is actually Foster Burton. Foster Benjamin Burton. My middle name's Ben, and I go by Ben. All the males in my family for generations have all been Foster. So my father's Foster Richard, my brother's Foster Samuel, and so on and so forth. And the story of it is that way back, however many generations, when the Foster's Brewery family, I think it was coming from Germany to America or the other way around, so I should know this a bit better. That the daughter of the Foster's Brewery family married Burton and then kept the Foster as a title, took the last name, kept it as a title, and from then on, all of the males have been Fosters. So it's growing up, I never really thought about it. It was always just like only my very, very close friends knew about it, and then only Medicare knew about it because they completely threw that government service into disarray anytime we'd need to claim something on Medicare. And it did have its advantages. When I was 18 and an idiot, I went through a stage of pinching my dad's AHM card, going getting massages and sunglasses and all sorts of stuff, and then I didn't. Again, there's some things I didn't know when I was young. He got a letter with his premiums had gone through the roof, and he comes in, he's like, "Have you been using my card?" And I was like, "Yeah." I thought it was like American Express, but you just don't have to pay it back. And he's like, "Look at my premiums." I'm going down to the little massage place every couple of weeks. So yes, it has been confusing with its benefits, but I am certainly now. This is the first time I've kind of lent into it. And when I was writing a book, it was just an obvious thing to do. I'll use my real name.
Does any of your family do they stick in first, second, third, or anything like that? After
No. It's always just Foster, and then whatever name they're going to be called, and then a middle name. I haven't got a middle name. My son is Foster as well. But yeah, that's cool. I
remember talking to an American, and he was whatever the third, and I said, "Why do you Americans do that?" And they went, "Well, we got it from you. You got it from the English."
Yeah.
no, we don't do that. And he goes, yeah, you do. Elizabeth II,
Yeah,
Henry VIII.
King George VIII. Yeah,
Kings and queens.
yeah, that's right.
Slightly
Yeah,
different.
Well,
that's good.
that's a really
That
cool
is,
story. That's a real great legacy, and the fact that you've even called your own son Foster as well. That's very cool. Getting back to
yeah,
writing, historical
mm,
fiction and
yeah,
research. So
yeah,
you've talked about your story as to how you settled on the idea of writing and where the story idea came from. So then
Mm.
you embarked on writing this um, late 19th century Australian yarn.
mm,
And then you would have had to do a fair bit of research, I'm guessing, to make sure that you stayed true to that period. So talk us through
yeah.
the research that you had to do.
Yeah, for sure. So when I set out to write this particular book, I think if I had come to the epiphany in a different way, if I'd strategically gone, I think I'm going to write a book and not kind of had the idea first and then had the epiphany, I would have started like I'm a massive war history fanatic. I'm the first Second World Wars. I'm say I'm a borderline obsessed with them, and I love war history. And if I took you on a tour of our house, beneath like amongst my wife's more gentle, lovely artworks, you will find military antiques hanging on the wall. Like you can, there is a piece of a Messerschmitt up the top there from the Battle of Britain, um, and there's a light horse bayonet halfway up the stairs to our bedroom in case anybody decides to rob us. Um, but because of this idea first, I ended up, back in the late 19th century in colonial Australia, which is a very gritty, wild time. And I think that at the same time, just to set the scene of as I'm writing this story about, squatters in like the turn of the century when squatting is basically becoming very frowned upon. It's like the government woke up and went, hey, wait a second, we should be making money off this. And they're trying to turn all these squatters into landowners and dividing up the colonies. So at this time, at this very moment when I'm writing this book and researching it, I am also on this ramshackle farm with no idea what I'm doing in a house that we've stripped to the studs because it was made of asbestos, which was lovely to find out post settlement. And at this, like I'm sleeping in a swag in a house with no roof, with no water, and in the morning I'm hiking down like this crazy rock thing to swim in a creek to wash, and having fires at night by myself, and it's the best. And like, so that was a big sort of not so much research, but experiencing this, the kind of the grittiness of it, the like not knowing what I'm doing, as if I've just rocked up on this like patch of land and now I have to try and forge a living out of it. Um, but I think that the main thing with researching, especially the 19th century and that era, was it was quite hard. Like it took a good, as I'm getting immersed into the story, because I think naturally you tend to write how you would interact with somebody, and you just like how we speak. I think it's then when you have to go back and reread everything and think about like different dialect and different names for things that were like commonplace but were just referred to as different things, and that was probably what took the longest. And I think it took me quite a few drafts, and every different draft I'd be finding something and refining it. And then at the same time, I'm also trying to read a lot of novels written in that era. So not just about like, it doesn't have to be about bush ranging, but if you go back and read like Rudyard Kipling's books that he's written in the late 1800s, you get such an amazing insight into little details that would be very hard to find otherwise. Like that in a different example, but just like I was recently reading one of his books, and it was just like ringing a bell in a particular room for the parlour maid to come, and like that's quite a hard series of events in somebody's day to find just by googling. It's like immersing yourself in that culture, because I think it's, if you can now quite easily say like, what would the flat-bedded wagon be called that they would have moved timber, and Google will come back instantly and go, that would be called a dray, and it'd be pulled by a team of bullocks. Great. But it's the sequence of events of like how to push put a bullock into the harness, and all of those little details that I found the best way to find those was by reading books written in the period. And just sort of, and then like looking at the way people that they'd written character dialogue.